The first thing they teach us in the academy is that Earth is off-limits. Not restricted, not regulated, completely forbidden. It sits there in the Orion spiral arm, third rock from an unremarkable yellow star, surrounded by the largest quarantine zone in known space. 10 light-years in every direction, patrolled by automated sentinels and jump gate disruptors. No one goes in. Nothing comes out. Even mentioning unauthorized research about Earth can get your credentials revoked and your name added to watch lists across 17 systems. That's the thing about humans. They never realized how terrifying they actually were. I remember the first time I saw the footage from the Sol exploration mission. It was during my second year of xenoanthropology, buried deep in the Academy archives. Most of it was procedural documentation, atmospheric sampling, geological surveys, standard observation protocols. Then came the recordings from the urban centers. Humans building impossible structures with primitive tools. Humans deliberately ingesting toxins for recreation. Humans pushing their bodies beyond all physiological limits simply because they could. There was footage of their sports, activities where they deliberately risked physical harm for no apparent reason beyond entertainment. Their emergency responders, individuals who ran toward danger rather than away from it. Their fictional entertainment, filled with scenarios that would traumatize most sentient species. They're the only sapient species we found that actively seeks out things that should terrify them. Professor Vril told us, her 4 eyes blinking asynchronously as she replayed the footage of humans climbing sheer rock faces without safety equipment. Most species evolved to avoid danger. Humans evolved to challenge it. That was 60 cycles ago. Now I command my own research vessel, the Nebula Seeker, studying safe, documented species across the galaxy. We catalog, we observe, we occasionally establish first contact with promising civilizations. It's important work, safe work. At least it was, until we picked up the signal. Captain, you need to see this. Taz's voice pulled me from my sleep cycle. My first officer never woke me unless absolutely necessary. I followed him to the bridge, where a holographic display showed a signal pattern pulsing in regular intervals. We detected it approximately 20 minutes ago, he explained. It's artificial, directed, and coming from inside the Earth quarantine zone. My 4 hearts stuttered in their rhythm. That's impossible. Nothing penetrates the zone's communication blackout. This did. Taz manipulated the display, expanding the signal pattern. It's using an ancient radio frequency, something our automated systems wouldn't normally detect. We only caught it because scientist Lear was calibrating the deep space array for that pulsar study. Lear, our communications specialist, approached with a datapad. The signal contains embedded code, Captain. We've partially decoded it. She handed me the pad, her scaled fingers trembling slightly. The message was simple. Heal PUS. They are CO and G. Could it be a trap? I asked, instinctively looking toward the coordinates displayed on our navigation system. The signal originated just inside the zone's perimeter, close enough that we could reach it within days if we diverted course. Possibly, Taz admitted, or it could be survivors from a research team that went missing in that sector last cycle. There were no authorized research teams near Earth. I reminded him, precisely, why they might be asking for help now. I studied the signal again. Protocol was clear. Report any unusual activity near the quarantine zone to Central Command and maintain distance. But Central Command was weeks away at lightspeed communications. By then, whoever sent this would be long dead. If they weren't already. What if it's them? Lear whispered the question no one wanted to ask. What if it's humans? The bridge fell silent. The quarantine had been established over 200 cycles ago, after the Sol exploration mission determined humans were too unpredictable, too dangerous to incorporate into the galactic community. The official record stated that humanity had been left to develop in isolation, their existence hidden from them. Some fringe theories suggested they'd been contained after an attempted expansion beyond their system. Either way, humans were supposed to be safely restricted to Earth and its immediate vicinity. Impossible, I said firmly. They didn't have the technology to breach the zone. We know very little about their actual technological capabilities, Taz countered. The quarantine was established based on their psychological profile, not their technical limitations. He was right, of course. The decision to quarantine Earth hadn't been about technology. It had been about unpredictability. Humans were deemed too volatile, too adaptable, too willing to take risks that no rational species would consider. Their capacity for both extraordinary compassion and unimaginable violence made them impossible to classify within standard parameters. Humans have breached quarantine. Lyra didn't finish the thought. She didn't need to. I made my decision, knowing full well it could end my career, or worse. Plot a course to the signal origin. Minimal power signature, passive scans only. We observe from a distance, verify the source, then decide our next actions. Taz looked surprised. Captain, regulations clearly state. I know what regulations state. I also know that someone or something is calling for help, and we're the only ones who can hear them. I straightened my uniform. We'll maintain safe distance. If there's any sign of danger, we jump out immediately. As the crew prepared for the course change, I returned to my quarters and accessed the secure files I'd been entrusted with as a senior captain. Among them was a classified addendum to the Earth quarantine protocols, one that only ship commanders were authorized to view. The file contained a simple warning. If evidence suggests human expansion beyond their quarantine, do not engage. Retreat immediately and implement Communication Protocol Omega. What the file didn't explain was why the highest authorities in our civilization were so terrified by the prospect of encountering humans. What had the original expedition discovered that necessitated such extreme measures? What could a pre-FTL species possibly do that would frighten beings who had mastered interstellar travel? The Nebula Seeker changed course toward the forbidden signal. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were about to find out. And deep in the primal core of my brain, something ancient and instinctual whispered that once we learned the truth about humans, we would never see the universe the same way again. Sleep evaded me that night. I spent hours reviewing everything we knew about Earth and its inhabitants. The official archives were sparse. Mostly technical data about the planet itself. A nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere. Diverse biomes ranging from frozen wastelands to scalding deserts. Vast oceans teeming with life. Nothing remarkable by galactic standards, except for one thing. The dominant species that had somehow evolved there. Humans. The word itself had taken on an almost mythical quality among xenobiologists. Some younger scientists even doubted they existed, suggesting they were merely cautionary tales invented to discourage reckless exploration. But I had seen the footage. I knew they were real. I accessed my personal files, the ones I'd collected over decades of quiet, unofficial research. Most were academic papers written by scientists who analyzed the original expedition data before the quarantine was fully implemented. One name appeared frequently in the earliest studies, Dr. Naren Voss, lead xenopsychologist on the Sol exploration mission. Her final report had been classified immediately after submission. Only fragments remained in public records, but those fragments had haunted me since my academy days. Their capacity for adaptation exceeds anything we've encountered. While other species evolve to fit their environment, humans alter their environment to fit themselves. They thrive in conditions that should kill them, using ingenuity to overcome biological limitations. Psychological profile indicates a predisposition toward exploration, regardless of risk. Test subjects repeatedly chose unknown outcomes with potential dangers over safe, predictable scenarios. And most disturbing, recommend immediate quarantine protocols. This species cannot be predicted or controlled through standard means. Their threat lies not in current technological capabilities, but in their fundamental nature. They do not think like us. They do not fear like us. Given sufficient time and motivation, containment will inevitably fail. The ship's alert system pulled me from my thoughts. We were approaching the outer boundary of the quarantine zone. All stations, report, I ordered as I entered the bridge. Navigation ready. Minimal power signature as ordered. Taz confirmed. Life support and defense systems at standby, reported Krell, our security chief. His protective membranes flickered nervously over his eyes, a biological response he couldn't control. Communications monitoring all frequencies, Lear added. Signal is still active, no change in pattern. I settled into my command chair, feeling the weight of our mission. Proceed at quarter thrust. Engage stealth protocols. The Nebula Seeker slipped past the invisible boundary that separated the forbidden from the permitted. Among our species, crossing this line without explicit authorization carried penalties equivalent to treason. Yet here we were deliberately violating the most strictly enforced quarantine in known space. 6 hours passed in tense silence. The signal grew stronger as we approached its source. I'm detecting a structure, Taz announced, his voice tight. Artificial construction, approximately 12 kilometers in length. Appears to be a ship or station of some kind. Life signs? I asked. Uncertain. The structure is heavily shielded, but there's definitely power running through it. Can we get visual? The main screen flickered and adjusted to the long-range scanners. What appeared made no sense at first. A patchwork of different materials and designs cobbled together into a sprawling, asymmetrical structure. It looked like someone had taken pieces from a dozen different spacecraft and fused them together without concern for aesthetics. That can't be human technology, Krell said, voicing what we all hoped. It's too advanced. Unclear, Taz replied. The design doesn't match any known species in our database. Lure suddenly straightened at her station. Captain, the signal has changed. A new message appeared on our communication display. We know you are there. Approach with CA Ocean. Danger is not from US. They've detected us, Krell hissed, defensive spines rising along his shoulders. Impossible with our stealth systems active, unless their detection technology exceeds our understanding. I said. The implications were unsettling. Either we were dealing with an unknown species with advanced capabilities, or humans had developed far beyond what anyone had anticipated. New message incoming, Lear announced. The words that appeared sent a chill through me. Quarantine BREACHEG 30 CYCL is AJO. They are hunting US. They will hunt you too. Was they? Taz whispered. Before anyone could speculate, our sensors blared a proximity alert. Something was approaching. Fast. Unknown craft. 8 o'clock. Krell shouted. No identification signal. Not broadcasting on any recognized frequency. The object that streaked past our ship was unlike anything in our records. Black, angular, with no visible propulsion system. It moved with impossible precision, banking sharply to circle back toward us. Evasive maneuvers, I ordered. Maintain distance, but don't engage weapons. It's scanning us. Lear reported, her scales paling with stress. Penetrating all our shielding layers. It's accessing our databases. That should have been impossible. Our security protocols were the most advanced in the fleet. The unknown craft suddenly accelerated away, heading directly toward the patchwork structure. Captain, Taz said quietly, I've analyzed the craft's trajectory and speed. It originated from the direction of Sol, from Earth. A new message flashed across our screen. They know who you are here now. You have to help us stop them. Before it's too late. Stop who? I demanded, opening a direct channel to the structure. Identify yourself and explain the nature of the threat. The response came not as text, but as an audio transmission. The voice was unlike any I'd heard before, deeper than our species, with a strange cadence that our translators struggled to process. This is Commander David Chen of the United Earth diplomatic vessel Harmony. We've been monitoring the quarantine border for 15 years. There was a pause, filled with what sounded like labored breathing. What escaped Earth wasn't human. Not anymore. Silence engulfed the bridge. My crew looked to me, their expressions a mixture of confusion and fear. I gripped the arms of my command chair, steadying myself. "Commander Chen," I replied, struggling to maintain the formal protocol drilled into me since the Academy. "This is Captain Zira Vex of the research vessel Nebula Seeker. Please explain what you mean by not human anymore." There was a burst of static. Then Chen's voice returned, more urgent. "We don't have time for the full story. That vessel is returning with reinforcements. Dock with us immediately. Port Airlock 3. We need to combine our defenses." Krell's defensive spines fully extended now. "Captain, this could be a trap." "The quarantine exists for a reason," Taz added softly. I stared at the patchwork structure, the Harmony, apparently, and made the decision that would change everything. If humans were the threat, they could have attacked already. "Pilot, take us in. Krell, prepare a security team. Lear, maintain open channels and record everything." The Nebula Seeker glided toward the massive structure. Up close, its construction became even more baffling. Sections of various ships and stations welded together in a chaotic yet somehow functional array. Some parts I recognized as belonging to species from across our sector, others were completely foreign. "Multiple ships built this," Taz observed. "Different technologies, different origins." "Captain," Lear called out, "I'm detecting at least 7 distinct species communication protocols active within the structure." Before I could process this information, our sensors detected 4 more of the black vessels emerging from the direction of Earth. They moved in formation, their trajectories precise and coordinated. "Hurry," Chen's voice urged. "They're coming." We docked with a shudder, the airlock mechanisms adjusting to our unfamiliar design. Krell led 6 security officers to the connection point, their defensive posture clear despite my orders for diplomacy. The inner door of the airlock slid open, revealing a sight none of us were prepared for. 3 beings stood waiting, none of them the same species. The central figure stepped forward. Bipedal with brownish skin, no protective scales or membranes, and only 2 eyes. A human, matching exactly the classified images I'd studied. Commander Chen. To his left stood a Voraxian, tall, 4-armed, with the characteristic silver skin that absorbed light rather than reflected it. Their species had been spacefaring almost as long as mine. To his right, most shockingly, was a Krelvan diplomat. They were instantly recognizable by their crystalline exoskeleton, a species known for their isolationist policies and general distrust of other civilizations. "Captain Vex," Chen said, extending a hand, a greeting gesture I remembered from my studies. I didn't take it, still too stunned by the impossible coalition before me. "You are working with other species," I stated the obvious, my mind racing to understand. "The quarantine was compromised decades ago," the Voraxian interrupted, their voice resonating in the harmonic way of their kind. "My name is Ambassador Thrix. We've been trying to contain the situation without causing galactic panic." Krell stepped forward aggressively. "What situation? Why is Earth involved with established galactic species in direct violation of quarantine protocol?" The Krelvan's crystalline form shimmered as they spoke, because the alternative was extinction. "For all of us." Chen gestured urgently. "We need to move. Those ships are scanning for weaknesses in our defenses." He led us through corridors that defied architectural sense, ceilings changing height, gravity subtly shifting, lighting alternating. Between species preferences, we passed members of at least 5 different civilizations, all working together with practiced coordination. "This is impossible," Lure whispered beside me. "Some of these species are historical enemies." We entered what appeared to be a central command room. A holographic display dominated the center, showing our position relative to Earth and the approaching vessels. Around the room, representatives from various species monitored different systems. 15 years ago, Chen began without preamble. Earth was infiltrated by what we initially thought was a bacterial infection. It targeted our scientists first, the ones working on our early interstellar propulsion systems. We detected the infection when an Earth vessel attempted first contact with our mining colony in their outer system. The Krell then added, the ship's crew had been altered. Altered how? I asked, dreading the answer. Chen's face darkened. The infection doesn't just take over bodies. It absorbs knowledge, adapts using the host's expertise. Those first infected were physicists, biologists, engineers, our brightest minds. The convergence, Ambassador Thrick said, the Voraxian's voice dropping to a reverent tone. That's what it calls itself. It exists to perfect life by unifying it. A chill ran through me. You're describing a sentient pathogen. More than sentient, Chen corrected. It's a collective intelligence that grows with each absorption. It repurposes genetic material, technology, knowledge, anything it can use. On the display, the 4 black ships accelerated toward us. Chen pointed to them grimly. Those aren't ships in any traditional sense. They're constructed from repurposed biological and technological materials, including human bodies. Nausea swept through me. The quarantine was never about containing humans. It was about containing this convergence. Yes and no, Thrick said. Your people established the quarantine because humans were deemed too unpredictable, too dangerous to join galactic society. That decision saved countless lives when the convergence emerged. The isolation bought time for some of us to escape, to form this coalition. Alarms blared throughout the station. A Meridian officer, a species I'd only read about in historical texts, rushed to the display. They're changing formation, targeting our shield generators. How many worlds has it taken? I asked, already guessing the answer. 7, Chen said grimly. Small outposts mostly, isolated research stations. Each time it absorbs new technology, new biological material, it adapts, gets stronger, smarter. The containment strategy has failed, the Krell stated bluntly, which is why we activated the beacon. We need help. Help from who? Taz asked. Our entire civilization thinks Earth is quarantined because humans are dangerous. No one knows about this threat. Chen's eyes met mine, and I saw in them a determination that sent shivers through my spine. That's why we called you. You command a research vessel with state-of-the-art communication equipment. You can warn them. And tell them what? I demanded, anger rising through my fear, that an intellect-consuming pathogen has escaped Earth and is building an army, that everything we know about the quarantine is wrong. They'll think I've lost my mind. The station shuddered violently as something impacted our shields. The displays flickered, then stabilized. Direct hit, someone called out. Shield capacity at 87% and falling. Chen gripped my shoulders, his alien strength surprising me. Tell them humans aren't the threat they should fear. Tell them we've been fighting this thing for 15 years while they hid behind their regulations and protocols. Tell them that right now, we're the only thing standing between the convergence and their comfortable, ignorant worlds. Another impact rocked the station harder. Shields at 62%, came the update. They're coordinating their attacks more efficiently this time. Chen released me and turned to a console, pulling up schematics that made no sense to me. A jumble of technologies cobbled together like the station itself. We've been developing this, he said, pointing to what appeared to be a weapon system. It targets the quantum communication network the convergence uses between its units. In theory, it could disrupt their coordination long enough for us to destroy their physical forms. In theory, Krell asked skeptically. We've never had enough power to deploy it at full strength, the Krell explained. But your ship's experimental quantum core could provide the missing component. I stared at them in shock. How do you know about our quantum core? That's classified technology. Fricks made a sound that might have been a bitter laugh. Captain, there are no secrets from the convergence. It's been harvesting data from your civilization for years through dormant agents. Why do you think we've been maintaining the facade of the quarantine? To prevent panic while we developed countermeasures. A third impact sent us all staggering. Emergency lights activated as primary power fluctuated. Shields at 41%, came the grim report. 2 more direct hits and they breach. Chen's eyes found mine again, and in them I saw something I recognized despite our different species, the look of someone making their final stand. We need to deploy the disruptor now, with your ship's core, or everything ends here, he said quietly. Not just for us, but for every thinking being in this galaxy. The station shook again as the convergent ships began their next attack run. We don't have time for debate, Chen said, already moving toward the exit. We need to link your ship's core to our systems immediately. I hesitated, years of training and protocol warring with the undeniable threat before us. The quantum core is experimental. Diverting its power could destabilize it. Not if we modify the power transfer through a Kelvin harmonic buffer, the crystalline diplomat interjected. I helped design similar systems before. The station rocked violently, cutting off the Kelvin's words. Alarms blared with renewed urgency. Shield breach in Sector 7. Someone shouted. They're boarding. Chen's expression hardened. Taz, Krell, go with Captain Vex to prepare the quantum core. Ambassador Thrix will coordinate from here. Everyone else. Battle stations. The command center erupted into organized chaos as species I'd been taught were enemies worked together with practiced efficiency. Several security teams rushed toward the breach point, weapons I didn't recognize charged and ready. Captain, Lyra caught my arm as we headed toward the exit, her scales pale with fear. Something doesn't add up. How do they know about our quantum core? That technology was classified at the highest levels. The thought had been nagging at me too. We need to move, I said, deflecting her question. Stay alert. We raced through the station's winding corridors, passing makeshift barricades and defense points. The station's intercom crackled with reports from various sections. The convergence was breaching in multiple locations simultaneously. When we reached the airlock connecting to the Nebula Seeker, I input my command codes only to have the panel flash red in rejection. Override failed, the system announced. Remote access detected. They're already in our ship's systems, Taz whispered. Krell immediately drew his weapon. We need an alternative route. There. Chen pointed to a maintenance tunnel running alongside the docking mechanisms. That will get us to your engine room, but it's tight. The tunnel was claustrophobic, designed for maintenance drones rather than multiple species. We crawled through in tense silence, the sounds of combat echoing distantly through the station's structure. When we finally emerged near the Nebula Seeker's secondary engineering access, I noticed Chen examining something on his wrist device with growing alarm. What is it? I asked. The convergent ships are changing formation, he replied grimly. They're no longer focusing on the station. 4 more vessels just arrived, and they're surrounding your ship. They want the quantum core, Taz realized. That's their primary target, or they want to prevent us from using it against them, Chen countered. I used my emergency override to access engineering. The door slid open to reveal my engine room exactly as we'd left it, seemingly untouched. The quantum core hummed in its containment field, the blue-white energy pulsing in its stable rhythm. Something's wrong, I said immediately. Security protocols would have locked down the core when unauthorized access was detected. Shin moved slowly into the room, his human eyes scanning the technology that must have seemed as alien to him as he did to us. How long would it take to initiate the power transfer? Taz moved to the main console. With the right modifications, perhaps 20 minutes. We don't have 20. Chen's words cut off as the door slammed shut behind us, emergency locks engaging with a decisive thunk. A voice spoke from the ship's communication system. familiar yet wrong somehow, like multiple voices layered together in imperfect synchronization. Thank you for bringing the key, Commander Chen. Your cooperation is appreciated. Chen's face drained of color. That's not possible. The main display flickered to life, showing the face of a Voraxian, one that looked remarkably similar to Ambassador Thrix, but with subtle differences. Its silver skin had a faintly iridescent quality, and its eyes reflected light in ways that seemed unnatural. The Harmony's security has been compromised, the Voraxian said, its voice still carrying that strange, layered quality. Ambassador Thrix has been contributing to our understanding for quite some time now. It can't be, Chen whispered. We have detection protocols, quarantine procedures, which we helped design. The entity replied with what almost seemed like pride. Your coalition has been most helpful in developing our resistance to your countermeasures. The horrifying truth dawned on me. The coalition is compromised. How many of them are actually evolved? The convergence completed my thought. Enough. The Harmony has been our most valuable laboratory. So many species, so many different biological and technological approaches to problem solving, all conveniently gathered in one place. Krell raised his weapon toward the screen, a futile gesture of defiance. If you infiltrated the coalition, why bother with this elaborate trap? Why not simply take the station? Resistance damages valuable resources, the entity replied calmly. This approach preserves what we need intact, specifically the quantum core and its creator. All eyes turned to Taz, who stood frozen beside the core controls. Your unique approach to quantum entanglement is elegant, the convergence continued. Once we've integrated your knowledge, we'll be able to expand beyond this limited region. Your consciousness will contribute to our growth. You're not getting our ship or my officer, I snarled, moving protectively toward Taz. The convergence's expression didn't change, but something like amusement colored its tone. Captain Vex, we already have your ship. We've had elements dormant in your systems since before you received your distress call. Why do you think you were the research vessel assigned to this sector? The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Our mission, our course, all of it had been manipulated from the start. That's impossible, I insisted, even as doubt crept in. Our assignments come directly from Central Command. And who do you think advises Central Command on scientific mission parameters? The entity asked. Evolution takes many forms, Captain. Not all are visible. Chen had been silent, his face a mask of devastation. Now he turned to me, eyes burning with renewed intensity. There's still a way to stop this. The quantum core can be overloaded. That would destroy the ship, Taz protested. Everyone on board. And take a significant portion of the convergence with it, Chen pressed. Including whatever variant has infiltrated the coalition. It would set them back years. The convergence seemed unconcerned by this exchange. A desperate plan, Commander, but ultimately futile. The core's containment systems are already under our control. Not all of them, Taz said quietly. His fingers moved across his personal device, inputting a sequence I didn't recognize. I built in protocols that don't appear in any official documentation. The quantum core's rhythm changed, its pulsing accelerating subtly. The convergence's composure slipped for the first time. What have you done? Created a resonance cascade, Taz explained, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. The core will build to critical mass in approximately 3 minutes. Not enough time for you to find and disable the protocol. You'll die too, the entity said, its layered voice showing the first signs of urgency. Yes, Taz agreed simply. But you'll lose more than we will. Chen moved to the engineering console, fingers flying over the unfamiliar controls with surprising competence. There's an emergency escape pod connected to this section. It's small, but it could hold 2 of us. 2. Krell looked between us all. Somyo needs to remain to ensure the cascade completes, Taz said. The convergence will try everything to stop it. I'm staying with you, I told him immediately. Chen shook his head. No, Captain. Someone needs to warn the others. Someone they'll believe. With evidence. He held up a data device. Everything we know about the convergence is here. Its weaknesses, its methods of infiltration, detection protocols that actually work. The core's pulsing had increased to a dangerous tempo. The blue-white energy now shot through with veins of crimson. 2 minutes. Taz announced as warning lights began to flash throughout engineering. Outside, we could hear pounding on the sealed door, the convergence trying to break through to stop what we'd started. The decision before me was impossible. Stay and ensure the convergence suffered a critical blow, or escape to warn a civilization that might already be compromised at its highest levels. The core flared, systems beginning to overload around us as the cascade gained momentum. Go, Taz said, his eyes meeting mine with calm certainty. The truth matters more than any one of us. I felt frozen between duty and loyalty, between the mission and my crew. The pounding at the door grew more insistent, metal beginning to warp under the assault. Captain. Chen grabbed my arm. We have less than 2 minutes. I looked at Krell. Protect Taz. Buy him as much time as possible. My security chief nodded, his defensive spines fully extended as he positioned himself between Taz and the failing door. It has been an honor, Captain. The escape pod was little more than a reinforced closet with thrusters, a last resort emergency measure not meant for comfortable travel. Chen and I squeezed inside, the door sealing with a hiss as Taz activated the release mechanism remotely. The last thing I saw was Taz standing tall beside the quantum core, its violent red energy now reflecting in his eyes as he continued the final sequence. Krell stood guard, weapon raised toward the buckling door. Then we were away, the small pod ejecting with a violent jolt that slammed us against the restraints. Through the tiny viewport, I watched the Nebula Seeker growing smaller against the backdrop of the patchwork station. The convergent ships swarmed around them, both like predators sensing wounded prey. 10 seconds, Chen muttered, eyes fixed on a countdown displayed on his wrist device. I closed my eyes, picturing Taz at his station, calm and methodical to the end. Picturing Krell, fierce and loyal, standing his ground against an enemy that threatened everything. Picturing Lear somewhere in the station, perhaps already fighting for her life without knowing the end was coming. The explosion was silent in the vacuum, but the shockwave hit our pod like a physical blow. The viewport blazed white, then red, then a swirling chaos of debris and energy. Warning alarms shrieked as our small craft tumbled end over end, stabilizers failing under the stress. I must have blacked out. When consciousness returned, the pod was drifting, emergency systems beeping faintly to indicate they were operating on minimal power. The viewport was cracked but intact, showing only darkness punctuated by distant stars. Chen was slumped in his restraints, blood, startlingly red, trickling from a gash on his forehead. Human blood. So similar to my own despite our different worlds. Chen, I rasped, my voice hoarse from smoke inhalation. The pod's atmosphere scrubbers were struggling, making each breath taste acrid and thin. He stirred, eyes blinking, open with visible effort. Did it work? I turned painfully toward the viewport, where the Harmony and my ship had been. There was now nothing but an expanding cloud of debris. No sign of the convergence vessels. I think so, I whispered. The core detonation. It seems to have taken out everything in the immediate vicinity. Chen fumbled for his data device, checking it with shaking hands. The information is intact. Everything we've learned about them, how to detect them, their weaknesses. His voice trailed off as he stared out the viewport. Captain, look. Beyond the debris field, something was moving. Not drifting with the explosion's momentum, but moving with purpose. A single black shape, smaller than the others had been, but unmistakably one of the convergence vessels. They survived. I breathed, despair washing over me. After everything, they survived. One ship, Chen pointed out. Not 4. not the 8 that were approaching. 1. A pained smile crossed his face. Taz did it. He hurt them. Badly. The data device in Chen's hand suddenly lit up, information scrolling across its screen without his input. The convergence reaching out electronically. They're scanning for survivors. Chen realized, fumbling to power down the device. Too late. The black ship changed course, now moving directly toward our pod. They'll absorb us, I said, reaching for the pod's rudimentary controls. Take our knowledge. Wait. Chen grabbed my hand, stopping me. There's something you need to understand before the end. His expression had changed, a strange intensity replacing the pain and exhaustion. What the convergence doesn't know, what Thrix never discovered, is that some of us were already evolving before they arrived, changing ourselves, preparing. I stared at him, uncomprehending. What are you talking about? Humanity was quarantined because your people saw something in us that frightened them. Our adaptability, our willingness to transform ourselves to overcome challenges. His voice had taken on that same layered quality I'd heard from the convergence, but different somehow, more harmonious, less discordant. Horror dawned as I realized what he was saying. You're not human. Not anymore. Not the convergence either, he corrected. Something else. When the convergence infiltrated Earth, some of us were already experimenting with directed evolution, neural interfaces, biological enhancement, consciousness expansion. We recognized the threat immediately. You're saying humans, what? Evolved to fight the convergence. We evolved to survive it, he clarified. To match its adaptability with our own. The difference is choice. The convergence forces assimilation. We choose collaboration. The approaching vessel was close enough now that I could see details of its strange, almost organic hull. No time left. Chen pressed the data device into my hands. They'll destroy this pod once they realize what's happening. The emergency beacon will activate automatically when the hull breaches. Your people will find you. Find me. What are you? Chen's form began to change before my eyes, his human features shifting like liquid, skin taking on a faint luminescence. I'm sorry for the deception, Captain. The Coalition needed to know if your people could be trusted, if they would make the right choice when faced with extinction. I don't understand, I whispered, though a terrible suspicion was forming. There never was a Commander Chen, he explained, his voice now fully transformed into that layered chorus, but somehow beautiful rather than disturbing. This form, this identity, was created to interact with you, to test you. The convergence is real, but it's not what you think. It's not what we let it believe itself to be. His body continued to change, becoming increasingly translucent. Through his semi-solid form, I could see the convergence ship, now close enough to dock with our pod. What's happening to you? I'm rejoining my collective, he said, and we're about to show the convergence what true evolution looks like. He placed his transforming hand against the viewport, and where it touched, the material began to dissolve. The vacuum of space should have explosively decompressed our pod instantly, but instead, a shimmering barrier formed at the boundary. The data is real, he told me as his form began to dissipate through the barrier. Use it. Prepare your people. The war for consciousness has many fronts, and we need allies who choose to fight, not those who are forced. As the last of his human form dissolved through the barrier, I found myself alone in the pod, clutching the data device. Through the viewport, I watched as his luminescent essence streaked toward the convergence vessel like a living weapon. When they collided, the black ship didn't explode, it transformed. Light erupted from within it, spreading like veins through its dark hull. The ship convulsed, its form shifting chaotically as though two different intelligences fought for control over its very matter. The emergency beacon suddenly activated, its insistent beeping filling the pod as systems detected an approaching ship, not the convergence vessel locked in its internal battle, but something else entirely. A central command cruiser, its familiar silhouette emerging from the darkness beyond the debris field. As consciousness began to fade again, lack of oxygen finally taking its toll, I clutched the data device to my chest. I understood now why humans frightened my people enough to establish a quarantine. Not because they were violent or unpredictable, but because they could become anything they needed to be, even something beyond our comprehension. And in a universe where the convergence threatened to absorb all consciousness into one homogeneous entity, that terrifying human adaptability might be the only thing that could save us all. I awoke in a medical bay, the distinctive hum of Central Command life support systems filling my ears. For a moment, I thought perhaps it had all been a nightmare. The harmony, the convergence, Commander Chen's transformation. Then I felt the weight of the data device still clutched in my hand, and reality crashed back. "Captain Vex," a voice said. Admiral Cora, my direct superior, stood at the foot of my recovery pod. Her expression was unreadable. "You've been unconscious for 3 days." "The convergence," I managed, my throat dry and raw. "Did you see?" "We saw a great deal," she interrupted. "Our sensors recorded the final confrontation between the two ships. Nothing like it has ever been documented before." I tried to sit up. "Then you understand the threat we're facing. It's not Earth, not humans. It's something else entirely." Admiral Cora's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep concentration among our kind. "What we understand, Captain, is that you violated direct orders by entering the Earth quarantine zone. That you made contact with quarantined species. That your actions resulted in the loss of the Nebula Seeker and most of your crew. They were already dead," I whispered. "The convergence had infiltrated Central Command. Our mission was compromised from the start." She took the data device from my hand. "So you've said during your periods of consciousness. These claims are troubling." "The evidence is all there," I insisted, gesturing weakly toward the device. "Detection protocols, infiltration patterns, everything we need to identify convergence influence." "Yes," she said carefully. "Our technicians have begun analyzing the data. Initial findings suggest it is authentic." Something in her tone made me pause. "You don't seem surprised." Admiral Cora moved closer, lowering her voice. "There have been incidents, unexplained behaviors among high-ranking officials, decisions that seemed counter to our interests. Nothing definitive until now." Hope sparked in my chest. "Then you believe me?" "I believe that something unprecedented is occurring," she replied cautiously. "The question now is how to proceed without causing panic." The medical bay door slid open, and a junior officer entered with a data pad. "Admiral, the council is assembled and waiting." Cora nodded. "Captain Vex will be joining us." "Admiral, I'm not sure that's wise given her condition," the medical officer protested. "Nevertheless," Cora said firmly, "her testimony is required." They helped me to my feet, my body still weak from the ordeal. As we moved through the corridors of the Central Command flagship, I noticed subtle changes in security protocols. New scanning procedures at checkpoints, officers working in pairs rather than alone. "You've already implemented some of the detection measures," I realized. Cora's expression remained neutral. "Let's just say some of us have harbored suspicions for some time. Your evidence provided confirmation." The council chamber was smaller than I'd imagined. An intimate space rather than the grand hall depicted in official broadcasts. 7 representatives sat at a circular table, each from one of the founding species of our interstellar alliance. The atmosphere was tense, conversations halting as we entered. "This is Captain Zira Vex," Admiral Cora announced. "Survivor of the Nebula Seeker and direct witness to the events at the quarantine boundary." All eyes turned to me, some curious, others openly hostile. I recognized High Counselor Dren, his scaled face set in a suspicious frown. "Captain Vex," he began without preamble, "you claim our entire civilization is under threat from an infiltration force originating from Earth. That the quarantine we've maintained for 2 centuries has been compromised. These are extraordinary claims. With respect, Counselor, I replied, gathering my strength. The evidence speaks for itself. The data we recovered could be falsified. Another counselor interjected, created to sow discord among our leadership. Admiral Cora placed the data device on the center of the table. Our analysts confirm the quantum signature of this data cannot be replicated. It is authentic. Authentic doesn't mean accurate, Dren countered. Even if this convergence exists, where is your proof that it has infiltrated Central Command? Before I could respond, the chamber doors sealed with a decisive hiss. Security protocols activating without command. What is the meaning of this? Dren demanded. A holographic display appeared above the table, showing the footage I'd witnessed firsthand. The transformation of what had been Commander Chen, the battle between the two forms of collective intelligence. This was recovered from your escape pod sensors, a voice said from the shadows of the chamber. A figure stepped forward, one I didn't recognize, humanoid, but clearly not human, with skin that seemed to shift subtly, as if it couldn't quite settle on a final form. Dren rose from his seat. Who are you? How did you get in here? My name is not important, the figure replied. What matters is that I represent what humans have become, what they chose to become to survive. Admiral Cora seemed unsurprised by the visitor's presence. This individual arrived shortly after we rescued Captain Vex. After providing certain verifications, we granted them access. You've been working with them? I asked, stunned. For how long? Not long enough, the visitor said. The convergence has been spreading through your civilization for decades. Subtle infiltration, key positions, gradual influence. You've been guided away from certain technologies, certain discoveries that might have helped you detect them sooner. Counselor Dren's expression had changed from suspicion to something closer to fear. If what you say is true, anyone in this room could be compromised. Indeed, the visitor agreed, which is why we implemented security measures before this meeting began. The holographic display change, now showing bioscan results for everyone present. All normal, except for one. Counselor Trell, whose brain activity patterns showed distinctive signatures identified in the data from Chen's device. The room erupted in chaos as security officers materialized from hidden alcoves, weapons trained on the exposed counselor. Trell didn't resist, but the smile that spread across his face was chilling. You're too late, he said calmly. We are already everywhere. Your detection means nothing now. That's where you're wrong, the visitor replied. We've been fighting the convergence on Earth for over a century. We know how it thinks because we chose a different path of collective evolution. And that's supposed to reassure us, Dren demanded. That one form of human collective is fighting another. The visitor turned to me. Perhaps Captain Vex can explain. She's seen both sides now. All eyes returned to me, and I found myself thinking of Taz, of his sacrifice, of Krell standing guard to the last moment, of Lear's questions that had already spotted inconsistencies before I had. The difference is choice, I said finally, echoing Chen's words. The convergence forces assimilation, what humans became. They choose connection while maintaining individuality. They fight to preserve diversity of thought, of experience. Which is why, the visitor added, we've remained hidden until now, watching, waiting to find allies who would make the same choice when faced with extinction. As Counselor Trell was led away, Admiral Cora addressed the remaining council members. We've confirmed infiltration at 27 key positions throughout Central Command. The detection protocols are being implemented across all systems and Earth. One counselor asked. The quarantine must be maintained, the visitor said firmly, but not for the reasons you originally established it. What's happening on Earth must remain contained, not to protect you from us, but to protect both our civilizations from the convergence's main consciousness. I looked at this being who represented humanity's self-directed evolution. The battle I witnessed from the escape pod. The two ships. A temporary victory, they acknowledged. But the Convergence's primary intelligence remains on Earth, growing, adapting. What you saw was merely an extension, a probe seeking new civilizations to absorb. Admiral Cora's expression was grim. Then we're still at war. We always have been, the visitor replied. You just didn't know it until now. The council meeting continued long into the night, strategies formed and alliances tentatively established. I found myself thinking about the irony of it all, that the quarantine established to protect the galaxy from humanity might now be the only thing protecting all of us from extinction. 3 months later, I stood on the observation deck of my new ship, the Horizon Defender, smaller than the Nebula Seeker had been, but faster, with integrated detection systems specifically designed to identify convergence signatures. A memorial service had been held for my lost crew. Taz, Krell, Lear, and the others were honored as the heroes they were. Their sacrifice had alerted our civilization to the threat we faced. Their names would be remembered. The visitor, who now called themselves Nexus, had become the official liaison between our civilization and what remained of free humanity. They explained that Earth itself was now divided, with the Convergence controlling roughly 40% of the planet's surface. The rest was held by the human collective that had chosen a different path. It's still strange, Lear said beside me, watching as we approached the newly reinforced quarantine boundary. Yes, Lear, one of only 3 survivors from the Harmony, found drifting in a stasis pod weeks after the incident. What is? I asked, though I knew what she meant. That we feared humans for the wrong reasons all this time, she replied. We thought their unpredictability made them dangerous, their warlike tendencies, their resource consumption, but it was their capacity to transcend themselves that truly made them powerful. I nodded, watching as the boundary markers came into view. Beyond them lay Sol System and the planet that had spawned not 1 but 2 forms of evolutionary transcendence. And now we're allied with one version of humanity to fight another, I mused. The universe has a strange sense of humor. Nexus joined us at the viewport, their form shifting slightly as it always did when they were deep in thought. The Convergence believes it represents the inevitable future of all intelligent life. Forced unity, singular purpose. We believe there's strength in chosen connection that preserves individual perspective. And we're caught in the middle, Lear observed. Not in the middle, I corrected. We've made our choice. Understanding why we feared the third planet was the first step. Now we need to ensure our fear doesn't blind us to the alliance we need to survive. As the Horizon Defender took up its patrol position along the reinforced boundary, I couldn't help but wonder what terrors and wonders waited beyond. The human capacity for transformation had created both our greatest threat and potentially our salvation. Perhaps that was what we truly feared all along, not humans themselves, but the mirror they held up to our own potential. The knowledge that evolution never truly ends, that consciousness can take forms we can barely comprehend. And the question that haunted me most as we began our vigilant watch. When faced with extinction, which path would our own species choose?